You know, this week is probably a rerun to most of you. We're moving on from Ruth, right? Sorry. But I'm sure you all went back and read it, the rest of Ruth. But remember, Ruth had a son. Ruth and what was his name? Ruth and Naomi. Ruth had a son. His name was Obed, right? Had a son named Jesse, who had a son named David, right? So this week's a little bit of a talk about the faith of David, right? So now, probably, I think of all I don't even like to use that word, stories, right? All the great scriptures, right, that we get to read and study. You know, there's kids out there that don't know. There's kids out there who don't know who Noah is. They don't know who David and Goliath.
A lot of adults don't know.
Bingo.
I wonder if some of the children even know it's Jesus' birthday.
You know what? If you go, they're going to throw me out of here. If you go through the drive-thru, ask them and keep track. Go through the drive-thru, order your Wendy's, and just say Merry Christmas. Do you know what this is all about? With a smile. See what they tell you. Santa Claus? Well, David and Goliath is David and Goliath to me is, when I read it, I'd say it's a man's story. You know what I mean? I don't know if you women like it, but yeah, it's all about the little guy with the slingshot. Took down the underdog. All in the power of God. You know, I would just say this. I got to say this. I'm thinking about David. All right, now let me tell you. David was a young boy. Let's call him a boy. He was a sheep herder. What in the heck do sheep herders do? Now let's think back in time. Not now, Jim, right? We just turn them out and, hopefully the coyotes don't eat them. Back then it was different, right? I mean, your wealth was based on your sheep, right? But you know how important a job it was to be a sheep herder? Now, sometimes little brother had to be the one that did it because big brother, he graduated and went on to do more important things he thought. But the sheep were always a priority. So David was a sheep herder as a young boy. And what do you do if you're a sheep herder? I mean, literally, just think about it. If you are a sheep herder, how much time of your day is spent just looking at sheep? Counting them? A lot of thinking? Pray? Yeah, now, serious. You're out there by yourself. I try to think of this too, right? So obviously I think that David, we know, and we'll find out today based on his faith, he had a relationship with God. Where did that come? Yeah. Now, it didn't mean he was perfect, right? But he's sitting out there with his staff in hand, Arlen, right? On a rock. Sheep are all bedded down. He's counted them. Everything's good. They're in green grass. There's plenty of water. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't work 9 to 5. So I got to think, obviously I want to be careful how I say this, but what's he think about? What's he do? And one thing we knew about David is David could play the harp. So I guess if you were out there and you had a banjo, Arlen, or a guitar, you might just sit around play for a while, but you know, playing by yourself gets old, right? It's like play for an hour or so, right? He also was really good with a slingshot. Now, he got good for a variety of reasons. Practice. Let's see. Now, he didn't have pop cans, but, you know. How many times a day do you think David did that? Many? When I grew up, we had these slingshots. Right?
Yeah, it had a fork on it. And
Yeah. You know, what's really bad is as good as you get, you can get in more trouble than you get. But when you're out there with the sheep, it's just you and the sheep. When I was a kid, my great-granddad told my dad about me. He said, that boy of yours, he throws more rocks than anybody I ever seen. When we was little, right, Arlen, we always had a creek, big creek. At least to me it was big. And we'd find those flat rocks, remember? You know how many hours? That's because your all's creeks were uphill. I'm just thinking of a young man, David, how he spent his life every day as a young boy, right, just taking care of the sheep. Now, we also find out, we even see in today's scriptures, that occasionally those sheep get harassed or killed by big, harmful animals, right? I mean, I know right now if I had sheep, I'd probably be looking out for coyotes. There's not many bear around here or any lions around here, but there were wherever David was. Because we'll find in today's scripture, he had to kill a couple. Now, to kill a bear and kill a lion is not a trivial feat. David carried no sword. No sword. He carried his staff. Sounds like he carried his staff in his slingshot, right? But there were at least two occurrences we know of, right, where David had to, right, steal the lamb back out of a bear or lion's mouth, and then what? Grab them by the beard, cut their head off. It's a young boy, right? You can imagine when the old shepherd boy comes to town, right, just carrying his staff. You ever heard that word bullying? Right, now I don't believe in that stuff. I mean, I was always bullied and glad of it, right? But you imagine, you're just a shepherd boy. How many pick on? I tell you what, he's the one that grabs the lion by the beard, steals his lamb. He's probably not small potatoes when it comes to his heart and his passion for what he does, right? And the highest thing on his list of priorities was to talk with God. And when we find out, we read, right? We'll read, and not all of it today, right? Psalms is just plumb full, right, of scriptures that David has written, called out, right? What did he say? He was help me, Butch. He was the man after God's own heart. Was that the right word?
I've heard Pop Adkins say that so many times.
Yeah. Well, you know, he was. This is a guy who became the greatest, and still is today, the greatest Israelite king ever. Out of a field of sheep. So to me, this story of this David, this little punk, right? Bible calls him ruddy. I looked up ruddy. And I still wasn't quite sure after I read all these definitions what it meant. But I was thinking it meant red hair or something like that. But it says it's a healthy pink look, healthy look, right? What do you know any more about that, Butch, than me? I'm not I just said, what does it have, freckles, or I don't know what it was.
The Bible don't say the stature of the man,
Right.
David, but I would say he's a little bigger stature
Yeah. Well,
handle a bear and a lion. Let's say this, that God was with him.
there you go.
Yeah, God,
That's the moral of the story, today's lesson,
God
right?
was doing the battle. Yeah. He was just there. David had the faith.
You're right. There you go. That's it. Well, we're done for today. Huh? It's a great story.
You know, if you're sitting out in your field and a bear or lion comes out there to attack your cattle, I don't think you're going to go out there unless you got a gun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a sharp spear.
Four-wheeler and a gun and
Unless you can say God be with you.
yeah. And some of us do that and don't even think about him at the moment. And this is not David's approach. Right? I got to read the scriptures. But one of the things they pointed out in the lesson, I thought this is a really great message. And we're going to find out. It said, make sure, put this on your own license, make sure others know who you serve. Make sure others know who you serve. Mark, what was it? Mark preached or taught on it. I think he taught on it. And he always preaches on it, right? But all this Christmas, we love Christmas. I love the way Mark presents it. It's right. It's pretty practical, right? We do it. We love Christmas. My wife thinks I hate it. But there's a certain point in the calendar year where I start to enjoy the Christmas spirit, right? But if you leave Jesus out, all you're doing is following the commercial path, right, of this world. And it's a meaningless path, right? If you take Jesus out of any day, any event, anything you do, right, shame on us. But we do it, right? We have a tendency to not put him first. I've got to read. Okay, so right now in today's lesson, this is a time where we have a king. The first Hebrew, Israelite king. And we know who that was? King Saul was the first, right? And Saul, now he was a big dude. It even says, he's taller than Jim.
They said he was a foot taller than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, Saul was the first king. And during this time period, by the time Saul was king, right, the Israelites had come into Canaan, the promised land. And, they had a series of skirmishes, right, remember last week or two, we had like 8 or 10 we mentioned, right, of these guys, and God said, don't marry them, right? I don't want you messing with their gods. Don't want them messing up your, right, the bloodline. Well, these Philistines we've heard about, right, from way back. The Philistines were very, what the Bible says is they were very warlike people. I mean, they just like to fight. And to be honest with you, the land where they lived was land that God had promised to the Israelites. So anytime the Israelites crossed the property line, right, it was on. Or the Philistines went looking for a reason too, right? So I'm thinking of the Philistines, I'm thinking the Israelites. Now, I got to stop for a minute. When I'm reading this story, Arlen, you know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about Israel and Gaza. I can almost say, here's the Philistines and here's the Israelites. They're still at it.
Exactly, yeah.
They're still at it. Still at it. Well, they continue to be at it. That's what I think, that I feel. So anyway, we're going to start reading. And I may read a little early because I love this story. The Philistines were a descendant of one of Noah's sons. It had to be, right? When Noah died, he only had, 3 sons. Wives. They populated the earth, Nancy. Well, Philistines were, I guess, what would you say? Great grandsons of ham.
It goes clear back
Yeah.
to where the one brother give the other one, tricked him out and
Right.
birthright.
Good deal.
All the way back there.
So Jesse, David's dad, he had 8 sons. David was the youngest. And they mentioned 3 older ones in today's scripture. I got to read. Chapter 17, verse 1. I'm going to read a lot. But I read this fast because I get excited. Chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. Didn't I say that? Sorry. All right, so this first section I'm reading is just to warm me up. It says, now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle. Now this first few verses might have a lot of words in here you don't necessarily stick to you. But the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle and were gathered together at Shocketh, okay, which belonged to Judah. Belongs to Judah. Right? Judah. Sound familiar? Pitched between Shocketh and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Now, bear with me. Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah and set the battle in array against the Philistines. That means what? It's on. We're going to fight you guys. Okay. Chapter 17, 1 Samuel.
17.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Did I do everybody that way?
I just didn't hear you.
I'm
I thought you said chapter 1, verse 17.
I'm sorry. They set them in a race. So what do they say? We're going to fight. Now, obviously, these guys probably, they said, I don't know who did it. Blew the whistle. They all came together like a crowd, and they whack, chop, and beat each other up until you have the last man, right? And then you still want. Well, in this case, you got the Philistines on this side, Israelites on this side, and there's an individual from the Philistines who's going to make himself famous here, even to today. Verse 3. Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side. Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. Okay, now if you're from where I'm from, if you're on this ridge, you could be on this ridge. And you could be a whole lot closer than if you walk down, right? Back up. I don't know what it was like out there in the Middle East. But they basically said, we've established our camp here. Israel had theirs. This was not uncommon. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So what's a cubit? We talked about this. Length of somewhat, 18 inches or something like that. 6 cubits, all right, so 6 times 18 is what? I just do the math and divide by 12, and you come up with a 9 foot. And then you got to add a span. So how long is a span? Well, it's half of that, right? So he's tall, okay? I'm 5'8". I'm only half, almost half.
So Jay, my Bible study shows that Goliath was 8'11", and King Saul was 7'1", and David was smaller than you at 5'2".
Wow, he's at least taller than Angela.
She's not here.
No. He's a big dude, right? Now, he's so big, they're going to tell you how big he is by the weight of the steel and the armor he carries, right? It says, he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. Coat of mail, I can only imagine that braided brass or something. It was stuck together. It looked like little chains, right? I don't know how big it was, but get this. It said the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. Okay, now a shekel was a unit of money, honestly, right? And it had a certain weight to it. And I looked it up, like how much a shekel is, and I can't remember right now, sorry. But it's like, if imagine a quarter, right, or a silver dollar, right, has a certain weight. So anyway, this is just for fun. 5,000 shekels of brass comes to be about 150 pounds. You know, he's wearing a 150-pound suit, metal suit. He had greaves of brass upon his legs and a target of brass between his shoulders, right? So he's basically wearing a chest protector and greaves of, I think those are just like, you've seen them, like the soldiers, they have like these little, shin guards, like the soccer players, that's what I say. Okay, but this is common dress for a soldier. Now let's go on. The staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So here comes Goliath, right? And his buddy, who's probably, probably 6 foot tall. He's carrying Goliath's shield, right? Now, his spear, the head of his spear is what? Okay, 600 shekels. What's that come to? I had no clue, and I just tried to do something fun. It says about 20 pounds. The head of his spear weighed about 20 pounds, 18 to 20 pounds. This is why this is a man's story. I love this stuff, right? But this is scripture too. I'm not making this up. Go. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. His spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. One bearing a shield went before him. Okay. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel. This is one man that came out of the Israelite army, a giant. He said, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Why'd you come out to fight? He says, am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? He said, choose you a man for you, let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. If I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. So basically, the end of this fight was going to depend on who could whip Goliath, which looked pretty impossible. The Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel. This day, give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed, greatly afraid. Now David, our sheep herder, he was the son of that Ephraimite of Bethlehem, Judah. Remember Ephrathite we talked about last week? Whose name was Jesse. It's his dad. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for old man in the days of Saul. Now what's that mean? That means Jesse's an old man, right? And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and the next unto him, Abinadab, and the third, Shammah. Now, those are the 3 of the older brothers of David that said, we'll go with Saul and fight these Philistines. I feel like I'm reading out of a little kid's book. This is great. David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. Okay. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself. How long? 40 days. Since this just didn't happen just out of the blue. It's like he didn't just get mad over his spilt Cheerios, right? And go out there and say, that's it. 40 days he went out before the Israelites said, this day you send me a man. If you beat me, we're your servants. Otherwise, you're ours, okay? And Jesse said unto his son, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. So David's back at home. He's taking care of the sheep. His dad says, hey, your 3 brothers, they're out there on the battlefield. Take them something to eat. Take them and find out how they're doing. That's what the next verse says. Carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare. And take their pledge. What do they need? Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. You okay, Butch? Did I miss something?
No, he just missed something.
Oh, okay. Took and went as Jesse had commanded him. He said, as he came to the trench, as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for battle. This is the Israelite soldiers. Excited. For Israelite and Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. Putting the battle in array. That means what? We're going out to fight. Now, I don't know what they look. You ever seen those Civil War reenactments? You got these guys here and these guys here. They're looking right at each other. And one of them's on a horse, one blows a horn, and they all charge at each other. I don't know how the Israelites and the Philistines did it, but it couldn't have been any more professional or unprofessional than that, right? They didn't have rockets and spears and hand grenades they could hide behind. David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. Okay? Now, guess what? I'm almost to our lesson. Bear with me. As he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, or Goth. Now, Goth is just one of those little, what do you call it? Small towns there around. Yeah. Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard him. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? He said, surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter. So what's Saul saying? If you're the man, you take Goliath, you can have my daughter. Which I think is a compliment, right? Marrying the king's daughter. Well, hold on. We'll give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel, right? And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this? I love this. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? David, who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, David's eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. Now, this is little brother. Are you the oldest? Did you have a little brother? What was his name?
Jethro.
Yeah. He's a little brother. You know, it's like a stiff arm, right? Okay. His eldest brother heard him. Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the former matter. Now David has come down to bring his brother some food, check on him. How you guys doing? Dad wants to know. Let me know if you need anything. And he's, no armor, no steel, no nothing. But he said, Who is that big punk? Verse 31. I'm reading fast, but this is where it gets good. When the words were heard, which David spoke, right? They rehearsed them before Saul. And he sent for him. What happened? These guys in the army, they heard what David said. So they probably went to Saul and said, Yeah, I see that little ruddy guy out there. Thinks he's hot. But Saul sends for him. Let me see this guy. David said to Saul, he said, Let no man's heart fail. Let me reread that. Starting with 31. And when the words were heard, which David spake, they rehearsed them, they, meaning the boys who heard, overheard, soldiers, etc. They rehearsed them before Saul. And he, being Saul, sent for him. David. Okay? I put a few words in there. David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Him being who? Goliath. He said, Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So even Saul is decked out, right, in his armor. David said, Don't worry about what he says. I'll go fight that guy. Now, some people would look at David at this point as he's just a little big mouth punk. But he had something much bigger behind him, right? This is good. Verse 33. I'm hurrying, Tony. And Saul said to David, he said, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war. From his youth, he's been fighting since he got out of diapers. And David said unto Saul, he said, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Now this is Saul saying, Oh, really? Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, he said, The Lord that delivered me. Let's re-emphasize this, Jim, Butch. David said, moreover, The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go. The Lord be with thee. Put your money where your mouth is. Right? So anyway, they try to, I'm going to skip a few verses, they try to put some armor on David. I mean, shh. Can you imagine? He said, I haven't proved this armor. let me go without it. Okay? Just to say, David is not got any armor on when he proceeds forward, even though they tried to find some that fit him. He had the, yeah, he had. Okay, this is good. And he took his staff in his hand, chose him 5 smooth stones. He took his staff in his hand, chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on, drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. So guess what? David's coming out of his herd. Here comes, for day 41, I guess. Make sure I didn't miss.
He was probably covered up by the shield.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my next page. Okay. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of fair countenance. He was cute, right? Just a nice little cute Israelite, right? Just disdained him, right? He just laughed at him, right? And the Philistine said unto David, he said, am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? Meaning what? Sticks. Oh, he has a staff, right? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, he said, come to me, I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. He said, come on. Let's get this thing over with. Then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. Buddy, you have defied the God of Israel. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee. I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air. This is David talking to, yeah, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear. Hear that, Kenny? Take that to your class. All this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's. He will give you into our hands. Okay. I'm down to the end. How does this end? Not good for Goliath. Oh, you know, I have to be careful what I say. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose, came and drew nigh to meet David. David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Here comes little brother. David put his hand in his bag, took a stone, slang it. Now now we heard all this armor that he had on, right? Where did he hit him at? Right in the forehead. I think I said it before I read it, shouldn't I? David put his hand in his bag, took this stone, slang it, smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk in his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. I'm not sure what that guy did that was holding his shield. But, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine, slew him there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, took his sword. Whose sword's that? Goliath's sword. Drew it out of the sheath thereof, slew him, cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, what happened? I'm getting out of here. They left, ran. Okay, I've run out of time. But there's only a few more verses there to read. Okay? David cuts his head off, carries it with him back to the troops. Now, there's a great verse, the lesson pointed to me too. I thought was really good because David is a great author too. He probably did that too, right? He probably wrote stuff when he's sitting out there. I mean, I don't know. Look, go to Psalms 44. I'm kind of in a hurry, I guess, but I want to read this first because I really love Psalms 44. Psalms 44. And I'm going to read one verse. Verse 3. For they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them, but their right hand, and thine arm, the arm of who? God, right? And the light of thy countenance, because thou hast a favor unto them. If you want to, go back and read Psalms 44. David wrote that. So, anyway, it's probably time for me to quit. And, anyway, you couldn't have paid anybody to write a better story. Nope. Could you? Nope. All right. Sorry if it went too quick. All right, let's stand. We'll say prayer. Now, you guys get really excited. Because we're going to rely on you guys to carry us through the service, right?